The man at the head of the long mahogany table slid a thick manila folder across the polished surface. "We won't be needing your services anymore, Elena," he announced, his voice loud enough to echo against the glass walls of the cavernous boardroom. Elena sat perfectly still. She was 34, dressed in a plain charcoal turtleneck, sensible loafers, and dark trousers. Next to the 12 board members in their tailored Italian suits and silk ties, she looked like an intern who had wandered onto the wrong floor. That was exactly how Marcus, the CEO, preferred to view her. He leaned back in his leather chair, crossing his arms with the relaxed, predatory confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. "Your role here has become redundant," Marcus continued, glancing around the table to ensure the others were watching his display of authority. "The company has outgrown its startup phase. We need aggressive, forward-thinking leadership in the engineering department, not someone who just maintains the status quo." Elena did not flinch. She simply looked at the folder resting an inch from her hands. She had written the foundational code for this entire enterprise 6 years ago in a cramped studio apartment. She had built the architecture that currently processed millions of transactions a day. Yet, as the company grew, Marcus had systematically layered middle management over her, pushing her into a quiet corner while he took the magazine covers and the credit. A few board members shifted in their seats, exchanging knowing smirks. To them, Elena was a relic, a quiet worker bee who didn't understand corporate politics or high-stakes business. They judged her by her canvas tote bag and her unstyled hair. Assuming her lack of flash equated to a lack of power, Elena slowly reached out and placed her fingertips on the edge of the manila folder. She didn't open it immediately. She understood exactly what this meeting was. Tomorrow was the date her final block of founders' equity was scheduled to vest. Firing her today was a calculated theft, a brutal maneuver to strip her of her rightful ownership right before the finish line. "I see," Elena murmured, her voice steady and quiet, contrasting sharply with Marcus's booming theatricality. She wasn't angry. Anger was a useless emotion in a room full of people waiting for her to break. Instead, she felt a profound sense of clarity. If they only knew what was in the canvas tote bag beneath her chair, the smirks would vanish instantly. The folder contained more than just a termination letter. It was a carefully constructed trap designed to erase her legacy entirely. Elena opened the cover and scanned the top document. It was a separation agreement, densely packed with legal jargon. Marcus had not just fired her. He had included a clause requiring her to sign over all her remaining intellectual property rights and any claim to her unvested shares. In exchange, the company was generously offering her 6 months of base salary and a continuation of her health insurance. "It's a standard exit package," Marcus offered, tapping his expensive pen against the table. "Honestly, it's more than generous given your recent performance metrics. Sign it now, and we can process the wire transfer by Friday. We'll even validate your parking on the way out." A soft chuckle rippled through the room. It was the kind of casual cruelty that thrived in spaces where people felt untouchable. Elena continued reading, her expression neutral. She noted the specific clauses, the non-compete that would ban her from the industry for 3 years, and the non-disparagement agreement that would silence her permanently. They really thought she was desperate. They assumed her simple clothes meant she had no resources, no leverage, and no choice but to take whatever scraps they threw at her. "The IP waiver is quite comprehensive," Elena observed, turning the page. Marcus leaned forward, dropping the faux-friendly tone. "It's non-negotiable. You built the early prototype. Sure, but my team scaled it. You don't own this anymore. Elena, the train is leaving the station, and you're not on it. Just sign the paper and move on with your life." Elena carefully aligned the edges of the document, placed them back inside the folder, and closed it. She did not reach for a pen. She did not argue about her contributions or demand respect. She knew that begging for acknowledgement from people determined to misunderstand her was a waste of breath. "I will not be signing this," Elena replied, sliding the folder back toward the center of the table. Marcus sighed, an exaggerated sound of annoyance, as if dealing with a stubborn child. He clearly expected this resistance, but he also expected it to crumble under pressure. He was about to discover that the quietest person in the room is often the one holding the heaviest anchor. What the 12 men in the boardroom didn't know was that the woman in the faded turtleneck had quietly bought their company's debt 3 months ago. While Marcus had been busy expanding into flashy downtown offices, hosting lavish corporate retreats, and taking on massive high-interest loans to fund his lifestyle, Elena had been investing her early earnings. She lived simply not because she lacked money, but because she valued freedom over perception. She had quietly built a private holding company, Orion Capital, leveraging her early liquidations into a formidable financial entity. 8 months prior, Marcus's reckless spending had brought the company to the brink of insolvency. A mysterious private equity firm, Orion Capital, had stepped in, purchasing the company's distressed debt and providing a bridge loan that kept the lights on. The board had celebrated the bailout, completely unaware that the sole proprietor of Orion Capital was the very software engineer they routinely ignored in the hallways. Elena reached into her canvas tote and pulled out her phone. An older model with a scuffed case. She tapped the screen once. Her inbox showed a confirmed digital receipt from her bank, time-stamped just 10 minutes ago. The final grace period on the company's loan had officially expired. "Elena, let's not make this difficult," chimed in David, the chief financial officer, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "If you don't sign, we'll be forced to terminate you for cause. Insubordination. You'll leave with nothing. No severance. No insurance. It's corporate suicide." "I understand the terms you are proposing," Elena answered, her eyes moving from the CFO back to Marcus. She felt a brief flicker of pity for David. He was a numbers man who had completely failed to do the math on his own company's liabilities. The debt covenant she had structured through Orion Capital was airtight. If the company's valuation dipped, or if there was a material change in key personnel, a clause she had personally drafted the loan could be called in immediately. By firing her, Marcus was pulling the pin on his own grenade. "Then stop wasting our time," Marcus snapped, checking his platinum wristwatch. "I have a lunch meeting at 1. Sign the document." Elena placed her phone face down on the table, the screen dark. As she prepared to draw the final boundary, Elena looked at Marcus, really looking at him. She saw a man who had confused arrogance with competence, who believed that wearing a $6,000 suit made him invincible. "Marcus," Elena began, her voice retaining its calm, measured cadence, "I am going to ask you one time to formally withdraw this termination and reconsider the restructuring of this company's leadership." For a second, the boardroom was dead silent. Then, Marcus laughed. It was a harsh barking sound that prompted a few of the board members to join in. "Are you threatening me?" Marcus asked, shaking his head in disbelief. You're a mid-level coder who got lucky on a startup wave? You don't make demands here. You don't have the leverage, the money, or the title to tell me how to run my company. It's a simple request for reconsideration," Elena clarified, her face a mask of polite indifference. "I want it on the record that I gave the board an opportunity to correct this error." David, the CFO, groaned, rubbing his temples. "Elena, please, you're embarrassing yourself. There is no error. The board voted unanimously this morning. You're out." Elena nodded slowly. She didn't feel humiliated or embarrassed. She had needed them to confirm, verbally and in front of witnesses, that the decision to terminate her was final and collective. They had just given her exactly what she required to proceed without an ounce of guilt. She unzipped the top of her canvas tote bag and began placing her personal notebook, a few pens, and her old company badge inside. Her movements were unhurried, methodical. She wasn't packing to leave the building. She was clearing the table to make room for what was coming next. "Good. At least we are clear on where everyone stands," Elena noted, zipping her bag closed. Marcus smirked, clearly satisfied that he had finally broken her spirit. He pointed toward the heavy glass doors leading out of the boardroom. "Security will escort you to your desks to collect your remaining items. Have a nice life." Elena did not stand up. Instead, she picked up her scuffed phone, turned the screen over, and unlocked it. Elena didn't raise her voice. nor did she shed a single tear. She simply dialed a number from her contacts and put the phone on speaker, placing it gently in the center of the mahogany table. The line rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Orion Capital Asset Management. This is Julian. Marcus frowned, his eyes darting to the phone. What is this? Who are you calling? Shut that off. Elena ignored him. She leaned slightly toward the device. Julian, it's Elena. I am currently in the board meeting. The management team has formally confirmed a material change in key personnel. Understood, ma'am. Julian replied immediately. Shall I execute the transition protocol regarding the outstanding debt covenant? Yes, Elena confirmed, her tone as casual as if she were ordering a coffee. Execute the protocol, call in the loan immediately, transfer controlling interest of all collateralized assets to the holding company. Processing now. Julian stated, access restrictions will populate across their network in approximately 30 seconds. Elena reached out and tapped the red button, ending the call. The boardroom was blanketed in a heavy, confused silence. The board members exchanged baffled looks. They recognized the name Orion Capital. It was the lifeline that was keeping them out of bankruptcy, but they couldn't comprehend why their soon-to-be ex-employee was casually giving them orders. What kind of stunt is this? Marcus demanded. Standing up, his face flushing a deep, angry red. Did you seriously just fake a phone call to our creditors? Have you lost your mind? Elena leaned back in her chair, folding her hands in her lap. She didn't bother to explain. She didn't need to argue or defend herself. The infrastructure she had built was about to do the talking for her. I didn't fake anything, Marcus, Elena answered softly. As if on cue, the massive digital dashboard at the front of the room, which had been displaying Q3 projections, suddenly flickered and went entirely black. A collective gasp echoed through the room as the projector screen re-illuminated, no longer showing the company's optimistic sales charts. Instead, a stark white notification box sat in the center of a red background. Restricted access. System lock initiated by Orion Capital. Debt covenant in default. At the same moment, David's tablet, which he had been using to review the severance paperwork, chimed loudly. He tapped the screen frantically, but it was frozen. My financial dashboard is locked out, David stammered, panic rising in his throat. It says our operating accounts are frozen, pending ownership transfer. That's impossible, Marcus roared. Pulling his own phone from his pocket, he dialed the IT department. Get IT up here right now. Someone has hacked the internal network. It's not a hack, Marcus, Elena pointed out quietly. It's a standard automated protocol. When a loan of that size is defaulted upon, the creditor seizes the collateral to prevent asset stripping. In this case, the collateral is the company's intellectual property, its servers, and its operating capital. The board members were beginning to panic. A man near the end of the table stood up, loosening his tie. David, what is she talking about? How can Orion Capital call in the loan? We haven't missed a payment. David was pale, scrolling desperately on his frozen tablet. The contract. There was a clause. If the valuation dropped, or if there was a material change in foundational personnel, the creditor had the right to call the debt immediately. Marcus slammed his hands on the table, glaring at Elena. You little saboteur. You tipped them off. You called Orion and told them to tank us out of spite. Elena looked at him, her expression completely devoid of malice, displaying only a cold, hard truth. I didn't tip them off, Elena corrected, her voice carrying easily over the rising chaos. I gave them the authorization. Marcus stopped yelling. The entire room seemed to freeze as her words hung in the air. You gave them the authorization, Marcus repeated, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. You don't work for Orion Capital. Just then, the heavy glass doors of the boardroom swung open. It wasn't it. It was the building's general manager, holding a thick stack of printed documents. He looked terrified. He bypassed Marcus entirely and walked straight toward the table, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Elena. Ms. Rostova, the manager asked hesitantly. Yes, Elena replied. The manager placed the documents respectfully in front of her. I just received a priority courier from Orion Capital's legal division. It's the formal eviction notice for this corporate suite, along with the transfer of the building's master lease into your personal name, as requested. I've deactivated the keycards for all executive staff until you authorize otherwise. Marcus looked like he had been struck by lightning. He stared at the building manager, then at the documents, and finally at the woman in the gray turtleneck. David, the CFO, had finally managed to pull up a cached version of the original loan agreement on his phone. He read the final page, the signature block that they had never bothered to investigate deeply because they were too desperate for the cash. Orion Capital, LLC, David read aloud, his voice trembling violently. Sole proprietor and managing director, Elena Rostova. The silence that followed was suffocating. The reality of the situation crashed over the 12 men in the room like a physical weight. The woman they had just fired, the woman they had mocked for her clothes and her quiet demeanor, was the sole owner of the holding company that owned their entire existence. Elena calmly pulled a pen from her tote bag, uncapped it, and signed the building manager's receipt. "Thank you. You can leave us now," Elena told the building manager, who nodded quickly and practically ran out of the room. Elena turned her attention back to the table. She didn't gloat. She didn't deliver a triumphant speech about how they had underestimated her. She simply let the documented truth sit there, undeniable and absolute. "This is a trick," Marcus whispered, his face ashen. He was clinging to the last shred of his ego. "You can't just buy our debt in secret. That's corporate espionage. It's public record." "Marcus," Elena answered, sliding the documents toward the center of the table so anyone could read them. "Vanguard Trust, which manages Orion, is registered transparently. You simply never bothered to read the disclosures. You were too busy booking the corporate retreat to Aspen to realize who was actually paying for it." David sank into his chair, covering his face with his hands. "We're bankrupt, without the operating capital. The company belongs to Orion. It belongs to her." Elena stood up. She didn't walk toward the door. She walked toward the head of the table. Marcus automatically took a step back as she approached. She picked up the manila folder containing her termination papers and dropped it into a nearby shredder bin. "I am not fired," Elena stated, taking the leather chair Marcus had occupied just 10 minutes prior, "because you no longer have the authority to fire anyone. As the majority debt holder exercising a default claim, I am taking immediate receivership of this company." She looked down the length of the table at the board members, who were now staring at her with a mix of awe and terror. They had worshipped power in the form of loud voices and expensive suits. They were now learning what actual power looked like: quiet, prepared, and holding all the receipts. Marcus, trembling with a mix of rage and humiliation, realized he was standing in a room he no longer had the right to be in. The bravado had completely evaporated from Marcus's posture. The reality of his situation was setting in. His options weren't just gone. His entire career was currently in the hands of the woman he had tried to ruin. "Elena, wait, let's look at this rationally," Marcus pleaded, his voice cracking. He placed his hands flat on the table, trying to project a camaraderie that had never existed. "We have a history. We built this together. You're an engineer. You don't want to run the day-to-day operations. Keep me on. Make me VP. I can help you manage the transition." Elena looked at him, her expression unchanging. She saw exactly what he was: a man who would step on anyone to climb higher, who only respected authority when it was holding a knife to his throat. "We didn't build this together, Marcus," Elena corrected simply. "I built the product. You built a toxic environment that alienated our best talent and drained our capital. I am not stepping in to save your job. I am stepping in to save the technology you almost destroyed." She pulled her laptop from her tote bag and opened it. The screen illuminated her face in the dimly lit boardroom. "Your employment is terminated. Effective immediately," Elena declared, her tone strictly professional. "You will not receive severance. The funds you attempted to use to buy my silence will remain in the company's operating accounts. You have exactly 10 minutes to collect your personal items before security escorts you off my property." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, to scream, to threaten lawsuits, but the words died in his throat. He looked at the board members for support, but they all looked away. They were already calculating how to survive the new regime. And standing next to a sinking ship wasn't part of the plan. Defeated and humiliated by his own arrogance, Marcus turned and walked out of the glass doors, his footsteps heavy and slow. By noon, the executive floor was entirely transformed. Marcus's corner office was empty, his nameplate already removed by the maintenance staff. The lingering tension that had choked the company for years seemed to vanish with him. Elena sat at the head of the boardroom table, her laptop open, reviewing the actual financials without the inflated projections Marcus had always insisted upon. The remaining board members had quietly submitted their resignations, recognizing that the era of passive compliance was over. Elena accepted all of them. She didn't need a board of sycophants. She needed engineers, builders, and honest operators. David, the CFO, lingered near the doorway, holding a cardboard box of his belongings. He had resigned as well, though Elena had agreed to give him a month's severance for assisting with a smooth handover of the banking credentials. Ms. Rostova, David murmured, pausing at the door. I should have known. I should have looked closer at the filings. Yes, you should have, Elena replied, not looking up from her screen. But you chose the comfortable lie over the difficult truth. Goodbye. David. He nodded slowly and walked away, leaving her alone in the quiet suite. Elena closed out the financial spreadsheet and opened the core codebase, the system she had written years ago. It needed cleaning. It needed restructuring. The work ahead was massive, but for the first time in years, she felt a profound sense of peace. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't stooped to their level. She had simply let the truth, supported by preparation and legal ownership, clear the room. She took a sip of water, adjusted her plain gray turtleneck, and began to type. The company was finally hers, not because she had fought the loudest, but because she had never stopped building